in marketing with a demonstrated history of working in the higher education industry. Professor obtained his PhD in management from Cochin University of Science and Technology, Kerala, India in 2013. He completed his Master of Commerce in University of Kelaniya, Sri Lanka in 2005 and his Bachelor's in Commerce in Southeastern University of Sri Lanka in the year of 2000 with the first class honors. He has been awarded with many fellowships, awards, and scholarships by several bodies for his excellent contributions. He has several research publications in high-index journals and has presented several papers in various research conferences across the world and has won many awards for his research and presentations. He has served as a reviewer, editor, and keynote speaker for many journals and conferences. He is a personality who strives to achieve the best from whatever he undertakes. Therefore, there is no doubt his skills and experience would definitely benefit you now. Before I invite Professor Hilal, I would like to share a few instructions with regard to the session. You're most welcome to ask any questions about the session, yet please be patient until the forum is open for questions. Please do not interrupt in the middle for the questions. Certificates will be issued to active participants and whoever fill up the feedback form that will be shared in the Zoom chat box during the session. All right, so let me now take the pleasure to invite Professor M.I.M. Hilal to share his knowledge and experience with you. Dear sir, this is over to you.
Okay, so thank you, Tafani, for giving a good or nice introductions about myself. And first of all, I would like to welcome all the participants for this today's webinars on the structuring dissertations for undergraduates and postgraduate students. And also, I would like to take this opportunity to thank these Faculty of Management Commerce and the Research and Innovation cells of the Faculty of Management Commerce to invite me for this session today. So first of all, I would like to tell you about this today's program. So many of us, or many of you could have understood that I'm going to have this academic writing about this dissertation, right? So, which I'm not going to do it today, right? So that will be taken or handled by somebody else. So I'm actually going to explain you how we can, right? We can structure our dissertation, right, for undergraduates and the postgraduate students, right? And this also might help even for the PhD students for completing their theses or dissertations. So I would like to share the PPT slides for you. So I hope that you all can see the slides now. Is that so? Can you see the slides?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So now this is actually, so when you take your dissertation, right? So it's actually, focus on your research work, right? So the dissertations, most of the universities, right, not only even in Sri Lanka, even in other countries, right? So they structured like this, right? So, and you may have some certificates, I mean, these certificates, ethical clearance, all those things will be there, right? So I haven't put that one in this structure. So, but mainly we have to focus on the title page, abstract, list of contents, right? So list of figures, right? Notations or abbreviations used in this dissertation, right? And the introduction, literature review. So that could be the first chapter, right? Introduction, literature review, methodology, data presentation analysis, right? So in some dissertations, you can say results and discussion, right? In some, so you may have a different names, right? And the conclusions and recommendation. Recommendations, if appropriate only, we will have that one. And the references and appendices. So these are the contents, right, of a dissertation. So how we can fill all these contents up here, right? So this is what we are going to discuss the whole 1 hour today, right? 1 hour, 1 hour 50, 1.5 hours. Right. So now, right, so we will discuss it each and every chapter, right? So the abstracts, we are going to discuss it at the end of this session, okay? Not now, okay? Because even now, see, I could see many dissertations, right? The students comes with the abstract first, right? I don't know how they are writing it, right? So we have to write these abstracts only at the end of final chapter. Okay, so after that only we can complete this abstract. So in that order only we are also going to discuss here today. Okay, so now, right, so first we will discuss the first chapter, right? So that is the introduction, right? Chapter 1. Okay, so I didn't put in on the slides, right? It's going to be the chapter 1. Right. So now, right, so actually, I have to share some experiences, right? So of the students who have done it, right, their dissertations, right? So I could see many dissertations, even for the undergraduate students, right? So even the postgraduate students, actually, they don't find time to spend on this chapter 1, right? So now see, chapter 1, it's a main body of the dissertation, right? It's going to be the main body, right? So where you are going to discuss most of the important aspects of the entire research process. Okay, so the entire research process, in the sense, now say from the research questions, research problem, research questions, your research objective, and your chapterization, right? Outline of these sections, everything should be there, right? So how we can structure this chapter 1, right? So it's a main body of your dissertation. It actually sets the scene for the reader, right? So when you write, right? So when you write on these dissertations, what will happen is, so first, the examiner, even the reader, will read the first chapter, okay? So the first chapter will be read by the examiner and could have an expressions, right, on in the mind, right, saying that this dissertation has been done, right, properly, right, with a accurate or maybe a proper guidelines, right? So this actually the first impressions will be given to the reader, right? And here, what we should do is, right, what we should do is, so the detail, right, so you have to detail the problem and the nature of the topic, right, which is you are going to examine, right? So it's important. So you have to provide the main, right, a justification that is being investigated, right? So that is the most important thing here, right? So it's not like, what the students are doing. Now see, the introductory chapter, right? So that is chapter 1. We need to start from the theory, right? So many of the students, especially the undergraduate students, even postgraduate students, they fail to bring down the theories that is related and from which you derive the research problem, right? So that is the most important thing. Okay. So here you have to, so now see, as we all know, right, the review of literature will help you from the beginning to the end of your final chapter, right? So that is your conclusions and recommendation, right? So the review of literature will help you, right? So to formulate your research problem, right? And accordingly, you have to develop your research questions, right? And you have to formulate your objectives, right? And you have to explain your problem, right? So the first chapter will be explained there, right? And so the aim and objective, right? So the aim is maybe your title, right? So the aim may be your title, right? Title of your dissertations, that you have to make it as an aim, right? So I don't want to say about write up of this, all those things, right? So you can, right, how to make that aim, right? So then you have to develop your objectives, right? So the objectives should be in accordance with your research questions, right? So now see, as far as I'm concerned, right? So the research objectives, research question and research objectives. Now see, many the authors, right? Many writers, like Sounder, right? Sounder's book, you can find that the objectives, right, should be matched with your research questions, right? So at the same time, when you read some other books like Uma Sekharan's books, if you read it, right, so they come out with just one research objective. That's also possible, right? I don't reject that, right? So you can develop your research objective. So now see, right, how research problem, in the sense how you are going to do that, right? So now see, the research problem, right? Many of us, what we are doing is we just guess some research issues and we put that in our dissertation, right? So it is not the way of scientific writing, right? So when you write scientific research, right? So when you do a scientific research, you should be able to formulate, right? So the research problem, right, starting from the theory, right? So whatever that your areas, now say, for example, employee motivation, right? So yeah, employees motivation, in the sense, you have to start from the motivation theories, right? So for that, you have to use the review of literature, right? So now see, the research problem, right, particularly focus on, right, the questions which you can see in the PPT slides right now, right? So now see this effective problem statement, right, actually answer the question, why does the research need to be conducted? Very simple, right? So very simple. So why you have to do this research, right? So, but now see, it's very rare to find, right? Even our undergraduates here, it's very rare to find, right? So the answer for this question. So what you have to do? You have to explain the research problem in the first chapter itself, right? So that's what, right, most of the supervisors, even your supervisors, put you in reading, right? You had to spend a huge amount of time in reading, right? Reading the previous researches, okay? Right. So now, right. So when you define the research problem, okay. So now you can see, right. So first you have to state the problem in a general way. That's what I said. You have to come from the theory, right? So you have to, generally you have to talk about that, right? So you can use review of literature there, right? And understanding the problem, nature of the problem, right? So it's now see what you call the so now see this understand its origin and nature very clearly, right? So and so for this you have to survey the available literature, right? And you can develop ideas through discussion also, right? So in the research now see sometime what will happen is the students wants to verify, right? So whether this the issue, right, the problem research issue still there, right? So you can interview the relevant people, right? Or you can discuss with them and come out with that problem, so which you have to state in the problem statement itself, how you have done it. Okay, so that is there. And then, right, so after the research, I mean, after completing your first chapter, right, so these are the main points which you have to put it in your first chapter, right? So when you structure your introduction chapter, right, you have to look at this, right? You have to address all these matters which you can see now in the slides. Okay, and then second chapter is going to be your literature review, right? Literature review. So now see, the review of literature, right? It's a paradox. Without review of literature, right, so we cannot do a study, right? So now see, even our students, right, here the students, right, so they are reluctant to spend time in reading, right? So why? Because as I said at the very outset of this presentation, the review of literature help the researchers from beginning to the end of that research, right? So I will show you, right? I will tell you why it is important, right? Even when you go for the third, fourth, fifth chapters, you will understand why this literature review is most important for us, because this is the only chapter that gives you more weight for, because it's your work, right? So you are going to work, right, on this. You are going to spend more time, right? So I think even what you call spending time on the data analysis, you have to spend more time on this reading. That's very important, right? So here, so I could see, right, many of the dissertation, right, even the undergraduates and postgraduates dissertations, they are just listing out what others have said about particular topic which you have taken for your study or understudy, right? So the literature review, it's an any existing and established theory on the areas of the topic taken for the study, right? So that is true, right? So you have taken the literature review, right? So you have listed, right? So it's, but the thing is, you have to do that review critically. So critical review of literature is most important thing, right? It is not just a list of everything that you have written, right? So most of us, what we do is, we just read one journal article, right? And you just summarize it and write down that on the chapter. So it's meaningless, right? It's going to be meaningless because the reader will be irritated, right? So it's not the way of doing review of literature, right? So that's what most of the students, what they say is they couldn't find, right, relevant literature on this topic area, sir. Right? So even yesterday I met some students, they said I couldn't find a literature review. It's not so, right? So it is there. Somebody have taken that, right? I said, I suggested, I downloaded 10 article and gave him because they don't spend time on this. Right? So now, right, you can see the literature review. In the literature review, you have to provide the theoretical background to your study, right? So please don't copy and paste, right? So please don't copy and paste. You take it, right? You write on your own words, right? And provide the due acknowledgement to the writers or authors. It's very important. Right? So the review here means by which you establish the links between what are proposing to examine and what has already been studied. So actually, when you read a review of literature, right? So there is a way, right? So you have to find what was the research problem, what their objectives, and what was the findings, and what is the conclusion, right? So what is the conclusion? What is the conclusion? So when you look at that, you can rewrite that one, right? So rewrite that one. You can compare many studies, right, in the areas of your topic, right? And you can write down, you can refine, even you can refine your methodology, because that gives you an idea of the methodology, right? So you don't want to write, what is research, the methodologies which you have taken there, right? So taken there, so you can refine your methodology with the help of the review of literature, right? So, but your writing part should be, right, their findings and comparisons, right? And you should be able to enable you to contextualize your findings, right? So you have to contextualize finding. That is the most important thing, right? So contextualize finding in the sense, you can look at, how do answers to your research questions, right, compare with what others have found, right? So somebody would have taken it, right? So you are just finding what is the difference between your finding, the others finding, right? And what contribution you have been able to make to this existing body of knowledge, right? So this existing body of knowledge, right? That's what I said, right? Even at your fourth chapter, right? Data presentation analysis, you should be able to discuss that under the discussion, right? And how are your finding different from those of others, right? So what is the difference that you can see? So you explain that, right? So the literature review is most important in structuring, right? So in structuring, you can, so there is, many ways, right? Different ways of writing this chapter, right? So you can divide the chapter into several subsections. That's also possible, right? So, but I have seen some dissertations, right? So even without subsections, you can write, right? So, but it's a very very difficult, right, at the postgraduate and undergraduate level, right? So it's better to divide the chapter into several sections, right? So based on your idea, right? So you can and you have to ensure to use wide range of sources. You know why? So you can, right? So because I have seen some dissertation, right, especially undergraduate dissertations. So they have used only one source, right, in different places, right? So, but they have utilized only one source, one journal article for your literature review, right? So now see, please remember that this one, you have done all the methodology, I mean, research methodology part. So I am talking only how we can structure the dissertation, okay? So I don't want to talk about the journals and things like that here, okay? So ensure to use a wide range of sources. We have to have wide range of sources. So that means that provides an idea that you have taken more and more research articles, right? And you have utilized that one for your study. So it's you would have spent a lot of time on that, right? So you got a thorough knowledge on the issues that you are going to address here, right? So that will explain. So with that, you have to structure your research, second chapter, right? So the literature review. Okay. So now, right? So how are you going to, so the first chapter is all right. Second chapter, literature review. Third chapter is going to be your methodology, the most important chapter, right, in the dissertation, because it's going to explain how you have made this study. Because all rationales and everything is would be found here, right? So it would be identified, right? So your research methodology should be, right, self-explanatory, right? So now see, when the readers, right, look at your methodology, they should be able to understand, right? So this study has been done, right, rationally. So now see what's happening, right? So you just think of it, right? So as a student, you would have gone through the previous research or dissertations, right? So I could see, right? I could see many of the dissertations lacks, right, on the methodology part. So what you can say about this, right? Okay, don't worry, right? So you will get a good idea on the methodologies while, right, listening to my talk today. So only thing is, right? So we are, right, we are teaching the students research method, but they don't spend time on reading, right? So if you can't read many researchers, previous researchers, we can actually refine this research methodology, right? So finally we can come out with a very good research methodology chapter, right? So it explains how the study was made, right? So now see, so in the research methodology, you can see some of the points, right? So which I have been indicated in the PPT slides today, right? So research philosophy, conceptual framework, theoretical framework, hypothesis, operationalization, right? And details of how you develop the instruments, right? Validity and reliability of the data instruments, right? and sampling and administration. That means, how you have sampled it, what sampling methods that you have adopted, right? So whether this, how you have collected the data, right? So now see, data collection in the sense how the students are structuring it, right? So they just, write 500 questionnaires were issued, right? And 350 questionnaire, duly filled questionnaires returned. Are we going to write like that in the dissertation? Right? Okay. So, and you see the research ethics, right? So if you have any research ethics, any clearance, right? So that you have made it, right, with your institution's permissions, right? So you can discuss that one also in the methodology chapter. And finally, you have to illustrate or explain how you have analyzed the data. What are the methods that you have used, right? So many of our dissertations says that, right, students have used the SPSS. So that is not the way of structuring this chapter 3 methodology, right? Okay, fine. So now I'm going to explain each and every one, okay, for you to structure in your third chapter, okay? So now see research philosophy, right? Saunders research onion is there, right? So everyone knows. So with the Saunders research onion, you don't want to explain what Saunders says, right? So citing the Saunders, you have to explain your philosophy. But now see, many researchers, right, dissertations, right, explain what Saunders says. So what the philosophy that we have adopted for this study should be explained. Right? So that is not with the Saunders word, only Saunders terminology, right? So you can cite him, right? So you can give a due acknowledge for the Saunders, right? So you can say, according to the Saunders research philosophy, you have adopted positivism as your philosophy. And then, so I think in the next slides, is there, right? So Saunders philosophy is there, right? Positivism, critical realism, interpretism, postmodernism, pragmatism, right? So you can say, right? So which one? So most of the students, we are doing a quantitative study, right? It's going to be the positivism because we have the hypothesis testing, right? So you have to say, this is the philosophy that you have adopted, positivism, right? Deductive approach, right? So you don't want to say about inductive there, right? But if it's your philosophy is interpretivism, you can say, right, induction, inductive methodology. So that means it's a qualitative study, right? So if you, so Saunders positivism is, Saunders research onion is there, but you have to say, what is your philosophy? What is your research approach? What is your research strategy? What is your research strategy, right? So whether is it cross-sectional or longitudinal? So what is the data collection? So you have to say your methodology. Explain it, right? So in order to increase the number of pages, please don't add all those things. Okay, so now, right, so this research philosophy you should be able to explain, right? And your conceptual framework should be explained, right? So based on the conceptual frameworks, you can come out with a theoretical framework, right? So but now see, before discussing all these things, right, so we are now see, if we are going to do a deductive approach, okay, so your methodology chapter should reflect the hypothetico-deductive method, right? So this is, you can get it from the Uma Sekren's book, right? So you can when you look at this methodology chapter, so that should be reflected on these aspects. Okay, so now see, we have discussed on this, right? So this one, actually we discussed this now see this identification of the research problem areas. So right, so we can see it at the first chapter, right? So then you have come out with your conceptual framework, right? And you have to explain your theoretical framework, right? Or you can say the network of association. It's most important thing, right? So because now see, the students, what they do is, right? So I mean, you, right, undergraduate students, they just, look at, right, conceptual model, and they just establish the relationship between your independent variable and the dependent variable, and you are explaining it. You are not explaining it, you are coming out with your hypothesis. It's not a scientific way of developing the hypothesis, right? So if it's a deductive method, so the way of developing a hypothesis, right, is by explaining the theoretical framework, right? So in the theoretical framework, so what you are really doing, how you will write this theoretical framework, right? So now, right, so theoretical framework, there are slides, which I can show you, right? The theoretical framework. So what's it actually? So it addresses the logical sense of relationship, right? So among several factors that are important for your problem, because you would have identified the variables, right? So I'm not going to explain here the methodology, right? So what you have to write here, right? Your variables are there, right? So that should be explained, right? So now see, as usual, we have independent and dependent variables, right? So in a theoretical framework, what we are doing is we are explaining the variables and its relationship, right? So with the support of strong literature review, because the relationship should be given a strong support, right, in the literature review. Okay, so now see, so this you have to, so now see what if the students comes here, right? So we just explain them, this is how you have to do the research, theoretical framework, right? So they will go, right, and take only one literature, one source, and explain it and come back. So that is possible, right? That is also possible. Some universities or some institutions, they have the word limitation for the methodology chapter, right? So for that, you can have it, right? So, but now we don't have such limitations, but you have to explain, right? So with the support of many literature. Right? So the theoretical framework actually discuss the interrelationship among the variables, right? So that are deemed to be integral to the dynamics of the situations being investigated, right? So from the problem investigated, right? So that your research problem, you would have come out with the variables, right? So from the theoretical framework only, as a conclusions of each and every variable, so the testable hypothesis can be developed, and to examine whether the theory formulated is valid or not. Right? So here only we are using a lot of what you call the statistical analysis. We'll come to that later, right? So we are actually developing this theoretical framework. Theoretical framework is the most important part for a hypothetical deductive method research, right? So most of us, we are doing that one, okay? And you see, from that onwards, you are developing your hypothesis, right? And you have the concepts and operational definitions for each and every. So that is your operationalization, right? So, and you have the research design and data collection, analysis of data, interpretation. How are you going to interpret that, right? So, and refinement of theory, right? So maybe pure research, or if it is an applied research, you have to implement that, right? So this is the hypothetical deductive methods which you should be reflected in the methodology chapter, okay? So now, say this, see this theoretical framework and the operationalization, right? So most of us, we are, right, developing an operationalization table, right? So this is one example, right? I got it from one dissertation, right? So I could see it was a very good one. So I just, copied, right? Got a screenshot on that and put it here, right? So now see the concepts, variables, indicators, measurements, questions. You have to provide that, right? So this should be provided with the support of literature, right? So now see this, actually this operationalization is for an adapted questionnaire, right? So not for, so otherwise, if we are going to develop a scale, right? So if we don't have the sources here, if we don't cite any sources here, so then you are going to develop your own scale, right? Measurements, so that you are going to use it in your questionnaire, right? So now see, I advise most of the students, right? Undergraduate postgraduate students, you go for an adapted one. So this is the operationalization methods, right? How we can do that. So now see, even if you take the variable, there are a lot of people have used this variable, right? So the indicators, that also has been used by somebody else. So I have taken from him. Okay. So the same way, now say commitment, right? So I have taken, this has been used many people, and these all indicators have taken from different people. That has been already used. Right? So here, since we are giving the due acknowledgement for them, so no problem at all. So that we are using it, right? So by giving the acknowledgement for the previous authors, right? So now, so operationalization table, right? So, and so how you have to develop the instruments. That's what I said, right? This operationalization, right, actually come after this. Okay, I have put it there, right? So now see the instrument development. How are you going to do this, right? So I'm not going to explain that, right? So if we are going to explain, if you are going to use your own questionnaire, right? So you have to have a separate procedures, right? A scientific procedures to develop your scale, right? To be used in the questionnaire, right? So you have to explain that, right, in detail, the methodology. Okay. So, and you can say its validity and reliability of the data instruments, right? So that's also is there, right? So you have to do that. Okay. So then your sampling and administration. So I think I have slides for that. I just want to take those slides, right? So the sampling and the instruments administration, right? So now, right? So most of the students, we just go for a sample, right? And so they have in their write-up, they don't indicate, right? So the population size. I don't know why, right? So if they don't indicate the population size, right? Sometime we can figure out that the student is going to use a non-probability sampling method, right? So if we are using a non-probability sampling, right? So we have to provide justification. Why we are using this non-probability sampling, right? So the population, now say probability sampling, now say for example, you are using a simple random or systematic sampling, or maybe stratification sampling, right? Or cluster sampling and all, it's a big thing, right? So cluster. So if you are using that, you have to indicate the size of the population. So without knowing the population size, how you can determine the size of the sample? So that's why, right? So we have to use the proper way of determining the sample size that you have to explain in the methodology chapter, right? So now say, for example, you can calculate it, right? You can do the calculations, or you can use a table, right? So what's that? Regis and Morgan table, right? So you can use that one, and you can determine the sample size, right? So you can actually you can explain that one in the methodology, right? And if you say, now say if it is an adapted questionnaire, that also you have to mention, right? And so how you have collected the data, right? So most of us say, right? So the researcher has issued 500 questionnaire, right? And 500 questionnaires and 500 questionnaires, and he got only 350 duly filled questionnaires and finish it off. They don't say how they collected the data, right? From whom, where they collect the data, right? So if you have done a pilot survey, you have to explain that. Right? So how did you collect the data? Right? So whether you have collected data on the road, right? So, or you visited the place where the executives are there, so you went and collected the data, you have to explain that. So just, please don't put a bold statement saying that, right, the 300 questionnaires received. Right? So you have to write in detail, right? So how the data collection, I mean, the questionnaires were administered, that should be explained, right? In detail. Right. So having discussed this research methodology chapter, that is 3, right? Sorry. So the method of analysis also you have to say, right? So one thing, the last point under this methodology, right? So what is the methods you have used for the analysis, right? So whether you have the multivariate analysis or or bivariate analysis is there, right? So if we have equations, now say most of us doing a multiple regression, right? At the undergraduate and postgraduate level, most of the students use the multiple regression. So you have to explain the multiple regression equations in that chapter, right? So if it is a qualitative methods, right, you are doing interviews, how you are going to analyze this one, right? So now we have many softwares, right? Or sometimes, people use thematic analysis, right? So then you have to say, right, how you have developed that themes to be included in the study, right? So we have to give a very detailed explanation, right, on the method of analysis. Okay, so now the fourth chapter, right? So having done all these research methodology chapter, right? So you have structured now very well, and then so we have to develop our data presentation analysis. So one thing, right? So first at the very beginning of this chapter, you can say something about your introduction, right? So then you are explaining, you are giving a summary of methods employed, the sample response rate data analysis you have to provide, right? As a small summary, right? So because you are starting from the previous chapter, right? So you can, right? So most of the students, right? Most of the students, what they do is they feed the data into the SPSS, right? And get the output, right? And they copy the same output and paste it in the dissertations, and they explain whatever. This is what happening. So I don't know why these students are just copying this SPSS output and putting in the chapters. So you take what you want, right? So there are ways of, presenting the results, right? So now say at the very beginning, you might have, you want to do, or you want to write something on the demographical profile of the respondents, right? So it's a must, right? So you have to, you can just, put that one in the dissertation. That's not a problem, right? So you can use table, percentage, charts, graphs, etc. Right? So, so when you do some statistical analysis, right? So please don't copy the same output which you have got in the SPSS output pages and paste it here, right? So you just, so you type, right? So now say, for example, what is that? The t values, probability values, right? Beta values, constant. So all these you can take it, right? You can put it in a table, and then you can interpret the answers, right? So if you want, you can put the entire SPSS output in the appendix. So because when the reader looked at, right, so he can see only the output table. So because we are going to address the research question, right? We are going to meet the stated objective of the research, right? So we need only the in-depth analysis and a discussion, right? So take that and looked at the values, p-values, and you can nicely summarize a table, right? So, and F values, T values, right? Probability values, everything, right? So R-square value, everything you can take, right? So, and you can just, interpret with that results. So very important thing that you have to do it, right? So you have to contextualize your findings, right? So now say at the very beginning, when we discuss about the literature review, right? So one point that we discussed with, now see, you can contextualize the research findings, right? So what is the contribution of your finding to the existing body of knowledge? That you have to explain in your discussions also, right? So link your analysis back to the literature review and discuss where your findings are in line or not with them, right? Make sure that you reference these. So now see, many of dissertations, even the postgraduate level dissertations, we are not seeing this one there. So we have to link. This is the contextualizing of the findings, right? So when the reader looked at, right? So this the link, so he can understand or she can understand, right? So this research actually contributing to the existing body of knowledge. So interpret the results and relate the finding to the original research goals and objective, right? And so you can indicate any implications of the research, right? So I have stated this point at the very beginning. Don't copy the entire SPSS output. So now, if you are presenting or if you are putting all the values of the SPSS output, then you have to interpret all the things. We are not doing, right? Some values are just so in the way that we have to form it, right? We have to have a format, right? And you can just, putting that one in your chapter.
Time வந்து ரொம்ப கன்சியூம் பண்ணு.
Okay. Then finally, the conclusions and recommendation. It's a final chapter, right? So after analyzing it, so I think analysis would have been done, right, by somebody else in the, I think by Dr. Halim, right? So it's, you would have studied a lot of things there, right? So the conclusions and recommendations. So what you're going to write in the conclusion, right? So many, I have gone through many dissertations as examiners. Conclusions are not a conclusion there. So the first point, right? So to answer the research questions, whether you have answered the research questions or not, right? So that you have to explain, right? So so you can use different terms or paraphrase your research questions, right? So which would have written in your first chapter, right? So you have to, whether you have answered those research questions or not, you have to explain that, right? So whether you have met the research objectives, so how did you meet them, right? So how did you meet them? You have to explain that, right? So so I have seen many dissertations. Some students, they have written their conclusions based on their objectives, right? So the first objective is this, and this is how this was met. Yes, fine. Right? And we have to consider the findings. What were the findings there? Major findings that you have to explain there, right? And to present any contribution of the topic, right, displayed in the literature, right? So you can link, right? So what you have discussed in the findings with the literature, you can bring that, right, and show the reader that this study has contributed to these researchers. Right? And you can to reflect on any implications for future research. That's also there, right? So direction for future studies you can explain, right? And also you can say the studies implications, right? So implications, managerial implications that you can write in the conclusions as a part of it. And if applicable, right, some researchers wants the recommendations also, right? So follow material set out in the conclusions, right? And then you should not include new issues, right? So you have to give a recommendations what you have found in the analysis, right? And state what should or should not be done, right? And you can brief it and direct it, right? So it's better to have a bullet point for the recommendations. This is how in the many books, they have stated. So recommendations can be given in the bullet points, right? So rather than writing in a paragraph. Okay, and then abstract. Finally, so now see you have written all the structure, right? And now you have to write about the abstract, right? So abstract is mostly going to be the one-page document, right? So not even 1.5 or 2 pages, right? So what you are going to write, right? So now see what you are going to look at this. Now see the questions are there on the screen, right? If you can answer these questions, that would be your abstract. Okay. So what were my research questions and why were they important? So you have to explain that, right? So what were my research questions, right? So why it is important, right? And how did I go about answering the research questions? So that is your methodology. You can just, summarize it, right? So what the methodology adopted for this particular study, right? And what did I find out in response to these questions, right? So what was the finding there? Major finding, because in all the findings we cannot include it in one-page document, right? So you can talk about the major findings that you have derived from your analysis. You can bring down here in the abstracts, right? And what the conclusions can be drawn. So if you answer this, right, so your abstracts will be structured. So this can be done only after finalizing or finishing your write-up of your dissertations. Okay, and then references. I'm not going to do anything on this, right? So references you have to have as an sections of your dissertations. So that's based on your or in accordance with the requirements of your institutions or universities, right? You can have your references, right? So but references actually for a dissertations maybe APA style or Harvard referencing or some other things are also there, right? Internationally there are some referencing styles which have been adopted and developed by those universities, right? So you can adapt that one, right? So but here we are mostly using our guideline says about the Harvard referencing. Okay, so that we have to adopt it. but most of the students are doing APA here, right? Okay, fine. So that's all about my presentation and structuring these dissertations for the undergraduate and the postgraduate students. So I actually, not explaining any methodology. I have indicated some points to structure your dissertations today. So thank you so much for giving me an opportunity, right? So I'm again, grateful to the Research and Innovation Cells of the Faculty of Management Commerce, Southeastern University of Sri Lanka. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your presentation. So we have learned a lot today. Dear participants, you can ask, if you have any questions, we can ask you now. You can unmute your mic and you can pose a question.
So please ask questions on the structuring the dissertations, okay?
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Sir, after getting the research question, we do have multiple platforms like theoretically, practically, or getting from the old journals or articles or from the authenticated books. But which key source gives us the loads of information on any research topic?
Yeah. So you are talking about the research question, right? So these research questions, right? So actually, if you are doing a research questions, you have to first address your research problem, right? So you have to first define your research problem. So when you define your research problem, yeah. Yes.
No, sir, it's some disturbance. Please continue.
Yeah, so from the research problem only, you can develop your research question, right? So to develop your research questions, you don't want to look at any journals article, or you can use it, but actually you're using the journal, literature to develop your research problem, not for the research questions, okay?
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Any questions? Any more questions? So if you have any questions, you can unmute your mic and you can ask related to today's topic. Have one more instructions. As I told you earlier, I have shared the feedback link in the chat box, Zoom chat box. Please fill it, the Google form, and you will receive a certificate of participants in this week, within this week. Any questions?
Thank you, sir. It's been really wonderful session and very informative and very knowledgeable. Thank you for providing us wonderful opportunity.
You're welcome, and thank you for your feedback. And you can, the recording will be uploaded in the YouTube channel. I will share the link of the channel. Wait a moment. Here I have shared the link of YouTube channel. You can watch that video, today's session later. And also we can keep in touch with Faculty of Management and Commerce, Southeast University of Sri Lanka, through Facebook and the LinkedIn page. So if you have no questions, we can leave meeting. Before leave the meeting, please make sure that you have filled the response form, feedback form, and based on that information, your personal information, we can send the certificate via email. And if anything,
So the feedback link was not opening well. If you don't mind, could you please send again?
let's see.